This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports, and we are on part 4 of this 496 cubic inch Ford FE build. I think I left you last time with going over some intake manifold installation tips, and we have got the intake flanges cut now, so I'll show you later on how that fits now. And we're basically at our next point, which is setting up our valve train and measuring for pushrod length. So I went ahead and assembled these rocker arm assemblies. These are Lykins Motorsports non-adjustable roller rockers, precision oil pumps, billet spacers and stands and end stands, and a set of Harlan Sharp heavy-duty shafts. So this combination right here will hold well over 700 pounds of spring pressure. I've actually tried this combination on a solid cam just to test the rocker arms out, because I know that most guys running hydraulic rollers won't put them to that big of a test, but took some really careful measuring and a lot of push rod ordering, but I actually ran my 352 with a solid roller cam and my non-adjustable rockers, and about 700 pounds of spring pressure, and everything held up really well. So this is far more than adequate for, you know, a 400-pound spring pressure with a hydraulic roller cam. But first thing I wanted to go over is your rocker arm geometry. And on a small block Ford, those are for the most part mounted to the head with a rocker arm stud and a poly lock. And you adjust the the rocker arm geometry with the push rod length. Well, on an FE, the rocker arms are shaft mounted, and they're in one spot because of the stands and the studs. They don't move. And the only way to adjust the geometry is to either raise the stands up or mill the stands down. And if you remember on my video about the trick flow heads, the rocker stand pads are already raised, so we generally look at having to mill the bottoms of the stands off. And Precision Oil Pumps is now offering their stands for trick flow heads so that you don't have to mill anything off the bottoms. These have been milled, and what I generally do, because you know, I sell these parts and I want them to be as universal as we can, but I also understand that guys will run pretty much any rocker arm with the trick flow heads. And even I have tried different rocker arms, factory non-adjustables. I've done T&Ds, I've done Harlan Sharps, and they all need to be raised and lowered in different amounts. So what I generally do is have the stands cut down by 200 thousandths, and if need be, if they need to be raised up, then I just use a set of my one-piece stand shims. But so the first part is getting the geometry right, and like I said, these have been milled 200 thousandths, so they're sitting kind of low on the valve stem. They're setting towards the intake side of the valve stem. And I've went ahead and primed the oil pump, so I got my hydraulic lifter pumped up, and I used an actual push rod to show what the pattern would be. And if you look, it's just a big old nasty wide pattern towards the intake side of the valve stem, and that's not going to cut it. Generally, I like to see about 50 thousandths width, somewhere around the middle. You know, you see a lot of guys on the internet saying, oh, it's got to be dead center. No, it doesn't have to be dead center. I don't want to see it rolling off this side. I don't want to see it rolling off this side, but I want to see it near the center, and I want a narrow sweep. And a narrow sweep indicates that you're getting the maximum amount of valve lift possible. You're not taking any losses due to poor geometry. So I've got this marked up and shown, and what I'm going to do now is shim these rockers up and check the pattern, and then I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so we got our rockers shimmed up. You can see I've got a shim, one piece shim that goes all the way across the head, and I went ahead and again primed the oil pump so that my lifter doesn't collapse on me when I put some spring pressure to it. And I marked my valve tip, and let me get my light here so you can see really well. So you can see how the pattern changed, and this has moved up about 100 thousandths of an inch. The pattern isn't perfectly in the center, but it's pretty stinking close. And I'm going to get a set of calipers here so you can see, so we can see about how wide this pattern is. And forgive me if the camera's not going to be focused right now. I'm trying to do too many things at once. So we're at less than 60 thousandths, and I probably didn't even do a very good job measuring because I'm trying to hold the phone and measure everything. But that's how important your rocker arm geometry is. And you know, you'll gain a whole lot more lift at the valve when everything is sitting the way it should be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure for push rods, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I got to get my camera situated so I can have both hands free, and then we'll go through that process. All right, so I went ahead and checked some other valves and looked at some of the patterns just to double check myself. And I was getting about a 52 thousandths wide pattern on this intake valve. So we were in good shape. Went ahead and shimmed up this side as well. And that's the point. The first step is that you have to get your rocker geometry correct before you measure for push rods. Everything has to be the way that it'll be when the engine is running, and then you get your push rod length. So before we measure, we also have to remember that whichever push rod we're measuring for, that lifter has to be on the heel of the cam lobe. And an easy way of remembering that is EVO, E-V-O. So you measure the intake valve when the exhaust valve is opening, and then you measure the exhaust valve when the intake valve is closing. So on an FE, the first lifter board that you come to is an exhaust lifter. So we're going to measure that one first. So that means that in order for this lifter to be on the heel of the cam, the intake valve has to open and then start to close. So let's roll this engine over. So you can see the intake valve has just basically reached its peak. Or I'm sorry, the intake lifter has reached its peak, and then we're going to start back down. So the intake valve is closing, so that means the exhaust lifter is on the heel of the cam lobe. And if I interchange valve and lifter, you know what I'm talking about. So the lifter obviously actuates the valve. If the valve is closing, the lifter is closing, and vice versa. So this one's ready to check. We're going to grab our push rod length checker. My advice here is to buy a push rod length checker from the company that you buy your push rods from. I predominantly use Trend push rods. This is actually a checker from Comp Cams, but Trend makes Comp Cams push rods, so it all works out. And what we're going to do, we're going to set our push rod length checker in there. First, I'm going to tighten this stand stud down so that the rockers can't move up and down, the stands can't move up and down. And we're going to open this checker up until we get contact. You don't want to compress the lifter or anything like that. We're basically just getting the distance in between the lifter cup and the push rod cup. So I'm right there. That's feels good to me. I'm going to loosen this rocker stand stud nut back up, and I'm going to lift this assembly up so I can just lift the checker out without touching it. And what we're going to do, we're going to zero our calipers, and we're going to measure this push rod, and it's coming in about 9 inches and 18 thousandths. So I'm going to write that down. One exhaust, 9 inches and 18 thousandths. Okay, and then to go to the next one, we're going to go ahead and tighten this back up before we forget it. You don't want to make that mistake of lengthening your push rod checker and you're basically just raising the rockers up off the head. I've done that many a time. So you kind of try to learn from that mistake. But we're going to do this intake lifter next. So we're going to roll the engine over until this lifter, this is the exhaust lifter, starts to open. Remember, EVO, exhaust valve open, exhaust lifter open. So okay, so that lifter's starting to come up. We're going to put our length checker in here, and we're going to open it right back up. And again, we're not looking to move anything. We're just measuring the distance in between the 2 points, kind of like a snap gauge, if you've ever used a snap gauge before. So I've got that done. I'm going to loosen my nut. I'm going to pick this back up. So I want to start my checker. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to measure this one. This one came in at 9 inches and 18 thousandths. 17. So I'm going to write that down. 9 inches, 18 thousandths. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to do all 16. I have a feeling that most of these are going to be pretty close to each other in builds where you have factory heads and they've been, the valve jobs are different, and maybe your valves are different lengths or whatever the reason it may be. Don't count on all your push rods being the same length. So measure all 16, and I'll show you what to do. I'm going to go ahead and measure all my 16, and I'm going to show you what to do after that. All right, I've got all my push rod lengths checked. Forgot to say this about, I mentioned about getting your push rod length checker from the company you buy your push rods from, and here's why. When the ends are made differently from time to time. This is called the gauge point of the ball on your push rod, and different companies have different dimensions on these. So, you know, it's not so critical when you have adjustable rocker arms, or you have standard travel lifters with a lot of, you know, room for travel. But it does get critical when you do, you know, non-adjustable rocker arms with limited travel lifters and things like that. So just keep that in mind, and that's the reason for buying the push rod length checker from the company you buy your push rods from. Another thing I wanted to mention, it's good to go ahead and get your rocker arm pattern from both sides of the engine. And I've even seen situations where the shim that goes under the rocker arm stands needs to be a different thickness from side to side. And that's because it's mainly factory headed combinations where you've needed to mill one head a little bit more to get the same combustion chamber volume. So that does happen, and it's good to check from time to time. These are all new parts, all new cylinder heads that haven't been cut or anything like that. So I'm gonna leave this one alone. But if you're working with the factory stuff, it's good to check both sides. So here's what I've come up with. My list of pushrod lengths from each valve. And if you're wondering, this is a hydraulic lifter cam, and I took the dimension from the rocker arm cup to the pushrod cup. You need to add in lifter preload after you get these lengths. If you have a solid cam, then you need to put your feeler gauge in between the valve tip and the rocker arm tip, so that you can get a good measurement, with the lash that you'll be running. But here's what I'm gonna do. This one, 9 inches and 18 thousandths. I'm gonna run 60 thousandths preload. That's what I usually run on my standard travel lifters. So I'm gonna add 60 thousandths to each one of these. So 078, 078, watch me make a mistake on camera here. 065, 060, 076. Need a calculator for that one, but you see the progression. What would that be? 9 inches and 42 thousandths, something like that. All right, you're gonna make me get a calculator out. I had 4 semesters of calculus in college, but I can't do simple math in my head. Wow, I got it right. All right, so we're gonna continue on. 069, calculator. 9051. So we're gonna stop there. And when you go to order your push rods, you can order them to the 1,000th of an inch if you want. The beauty of my rocker arms is that you can use ball push rods right off the shelf from any vendor. So most of those vendors sell those in 25 thousandths length increments. So for instance, 9 inches, 9025, 9050, 9075. So for this one, for instance, we're gonna do 9 inches and 75 thousandths. The same for this one. And here's where you have to make your decision what you want to do. Do you want to go with less preload or with more preload? So if I go 9 inches and 75 thousandths here, I'm going to have essentially 10 thousandths more preload than these guys, which isn't a big deal. 70 thousandths preload is not a big deal. And you also have to remember that an iron block aluminum headed combination will lose about 6 thousandths lifter preload when it gets hot. And the same happens with a solid cam. You gain about 6 thousandths lash with an iron block aluminum headed FE. So if I go to 9075 here, it's not going to hurt my feelings none. On this one, I will probably go 9050, 9075, all right. So you get the gist on this. So when I send my order in to Trend, I'm going to tell them I want 5/16 80 wall push rods, oiling, make sure that they oil, which is pretty much standard off the shelf deal, but you want to clarify that just in case, because there are some FE combinations where you don't want them to oil. And I'm going to give them all these links after I do all the math. All right, so I'm going to finish this up, and I'm going to show you how the intake sits now. So our intake's on now, and you can see I did what I said I was going to do. I cut the divider out, notched that down. Helps with these larger engines. A little bit more balance from the plenum. And I've got my gaskets mocked up. These are Mr. Gasket 202As. And as you can see, we cut 60 thousandths off each flange. And with the gasket on, we are right back to where we were. So nothing's sticking up, nothing's down. Just a real nice fit there. And we have a little bit of gap on our china walls. And our ports line up. So we are good to go there. What'll happen next, I just sent my order in to trim for the push rods. Probably be here midweek. And then I will mock up all the push rods and all the rocker arms and make sure that we have plenty of clearance on our push rod tubes, since the push rods run through the intake on an FE. And I'll probably also prime the pump to make sure that we're getting oil to all the rocker arms through the push rods. And then we can button this thing up and get the accessories on it, and finally see what it's going to look like. All right, guys. Hope this helps. Just some tips on putting these FEs together. I appreciate y'all sitting and listening to my hillbilly voice, and hopefully I can explain stuff in a way that you understand it. I'm not a very good teacher, but I appreciate you. And please hit the subscribe button. Tell all your friends that we're doing these videos. I've been getting lots of emails, people saying, hey, that helped me out a lot. Thank you for doing it. So that makes me feel good. Tell everybody, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And thanks for watching. This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. One last thing. This is my 352. I've named it Project Junkie Junk because it came from a junkyard and it had some pretty rough beginnings. But we're going to dyno this thing tomorrow, Lord willing. And we're going to see what it does with the ported heads. And hopefully we get close to that 500 horsepower mark. So keep your toes crossed on that one. And I'll let you know what happens.